A live picture to the Supreme Court. You saw protesters outside, both for and against. One of the biggest debates that they were arguing that day, and that was over trans students in women's sports. It appeared on that day that even though the Supreme Court didn't give a decision, that won't likely be until June, that they were leaning to the decision of possibly supporting the efforts to keep trans students out of women's sports. I want to bring in, we spoke that day with the Center on Halstead that counsels trans youth, and now we have Barbara Ehardt, Idaho state representative, who wrote the Idaho law at the center of one of these big cases here at the Supreme Court. Thank you so much for your time.
Happy to be on here. Happy to discuss this piece of legislation that has been near and dear to my heart.
Tell me why it is near and dear to your heart. I know that you are a former athlete. I see the basketball behind you. But tell me about why it's near and dear to your heart.
Well, yes, I did play Division I women's basketball at Idaho State, yes, a long time ago. But I also spent 15 years coaching Division I women's basketball at 4 fantastic institutions. And I absolutely know how all of this will play out, especially collegiately. We're going to leave women behind if we don't protect what we've been fighting for since 1972. Most people don't realize that in 72, 1 in 27 girls participated in sports. Now 2 in 5. That's almost 1,000% increase. There's a reason. It's because of the opportunities that's been provided. Title IX was an exclusive ruling. It wasn't inclusive. It was exclusive because boys and men already had their opportunities, and this was exclusive to girls and women. And it's important that we protect that, and that's what we're here fighting to do. And I know firsthand how devastating it is to have boys and men take opportunities from girls and women. I know that many use the word trans, but that belies what we're actually dealing with. We're dealing with the fact that biological boys and men are now competing against our biological girls and women, and we simply can't compete against them.
What alternative would you suggest? I mentioned when we were speaking with our guest from the Center on Halstead, I remember, and I ran track coming up, I remember watching a state track meet in California not too long ago, because I still kind of keep up with track around the country, watching a state track meet there that had become very controversial because there was a trans athlete in the women's division, and thinking to myself, I could really see the heartache in both sides of this debate. There was a trans athlete who it wouldn't have a place to compete. And there are also girls in this sport whose parents were saying, my child should be at the top of the podium, not 2 or 3 spots down. So what alternatives do you see in this?
I appreciate that, but let me redirect the conversation, the narrative that's been out there. The biological boys and men do have the opportunity. They need to compete in their own category. That category is still open for them. When they decide to step away from their category and step into the girls and women's category, that gives them not just 1 opportunity, but 2 opportunities, then deciding on which way they'd like to compete. If we follow what's been happening, you will see that almost always these boys and men started on the boys and men's side first and then crossed over. So to somehow come up with the idea that, they were uncomfortable competing there, you know what? So because they felt a little uncomfortable, we're now supposed to displace all girls and women and their comfort levels? It absolutely makes no sense. Let me take this just a slightly different direction. If June Eastwood was who our Idaho State athletes had to compete against. He had run track for 3 years at the University of Montana on the men's team, and the last year decided to run on the women's team. Just as Leah Thomas had swam for 3 years on the men's side, and then the last year decided to swim on the women's side. In the world of sports, and particularly like women's basketball that I coached, if Leah Thomas and June Eastwood had decided, even CeCe Telfer, who had been the Division II male champion, same scenario, if they had decided their freshman year that they wanted to compete against the women, I promise you that every school in the Big Sky and every school in the Ivy League and every school that had this situation would have, the coaches would have been forced to go out and recruit a male that could compete against them, because though the other side wants to say this is about compassion and inclusion and humanity, those may be subsets. Ultimately in sports, and particularly at the collegiate level, D1, it is about winning. If it wasn't about winning, then players wouldn't be cut and coaches wouldn't be fired. And so I propose this scenario. If we're going to allow just one biological male to take the place of a female, then we have to be willing that should 12 biological males try out for the women's basketball team, then we have to be willing to allow all 12, should they be able to make that team. And my question to everyone is, where do all the girls go? Where do all the women go? And I promise you, because it is about winning at the collegiate level, coaches will go out and recruit whomever they need to recruit to make sure they win or they lose their job. And the perfect example is what happened at San Jose State, and having a male athlete on their team.
So we are talking about 1 to 2%. Trans people make up about 1 to 2% of the United States, and obviously it would be even less for trans athletes in either high school or college sports, which is why I was asking you about what would the alternative be if we're only talking about such a slim margin here and not at large, writ large. What would an alternative be to satisfy everyone? Is there an alternative that could possibly satisfy everyone?
You know, that was really kind of my point, that they already have the alternative. Nobody's keeping them from participating on the male side. No one, not a single person. Why do they get to dictate what happens because of their feelings? Why? Why don't the women against whom they're competing get to dictate? Because feelings don't compete in sports, male bodies do. If they want to go out and start their own league, I'd be very, very supportive of that. But also, let me just share this. I had the opportunity to testify and help most sponsors bring this legislation forth as I travel the United States and other legislative bodies. And when this question was posed to us by the committee hearing it, is this a solution in search of a problem? I would remind them, good committee, you're about to hear testimony from all of these people behind us with their little sons who are going to be arguing that their son should be able to play on the girls' team. And this happened time and time again. There are hundreds out there. It's happening in Idaho. They're coming up. The door has been opened and the opportunities are being taken and displaced. So I would suggest to the other side, definitely form your own league. We will be supportive, and or you still have that opportunity, which is why we wanted to make clear the law, K through 12 and higher ed, very clear so that you knew from the beginning, if you want to participate in sports, then here's the path you need to. You need to go and participate on your biological side. And if we were to use the argument at the other side that it's not really happening, it's not a problem, then great. Then they don't get a play. It's not a problem. Very few are doing it. Don't displace our girls. I mean, that would be the way I would address it, but they do have the opportunity to still participate on the male side.
I was asking for the matter of someone who doesn't identify as a male, and the same may happen, obviously, for someone who doesn't identify as a female, but obviously, the hormones and the nature of our bodies being different would have a different disadvantage type of situation. So let me ask you this on a final note here. What were your thoughts on at least this portion of the debate that happened this week at the Supreme Court? I know you were monitoring it closely.
Yes, I got to have a ticket. I was one of them who got to go in and listen to the Supreme Court. Oh my goodness, what an honor. There's a lot of things at play here. Obviously, the Supreme Court won't just be examining the arguments that had taken place, all of the amicus briefs, and actually, to be honest, the decision in this committee, I think, will really set the tone of the precedent for moving forward. But it was refreshing. Of course, you could count on Thomas and Alito, but one of the things that Kavanaugh really had brought home when the ACLU was arguing was, hey, this is a zero-sum game, that if you put a male on the team, you are displacing a female. And then, of course, between Alito and Justice Roberts, they were pretty adamant that if we don't define what sex is, and very clearly the ACLU did not want to define what sex was, then how do we know if there's discrimination? So I think these were all bits and parts of an interesting narrative that is being formed around what happened yesterday. I really am highly optimistic. It really is important to me. I have fought for years, in coaching, for these opportunities for our women to have more opportunities than I had. People, I'm old enough that in high school we had to use hand-me-down uniforms from, the boys. Same at the college level. There were so many discrepancies, but I didn't complain because I had that chance. I had that opportunity. But we do want more for our women. And if men are taking our spots, and we're right back where we started, right back where we were in 1972. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to maybe share some of my thoughts with you.
Representative Ehardt, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. It is important to us to hear all sides of these debates. Thank you.
Thank you.